Hi, this is Mr. Mitchell with another social studies video. Why don't you go ahead and write down the questions and we'll get started. Today's video is what I'm going to call a wrap-up video. It's covering a couple of things that we just haven't quite studied yet in the year, but I'd like for you to know before testing comes a little later in the spring. One thing I want you to know is some stuff about Venezuela. Venezuela, as you can see, is this country in red. It's a little bit north of Brazil. It's just really near the equator. Equator runs right about the southern tip of it, and Venezuela is a really hot country. As a result, you see the map of Venezuela down here. Venezuela has this huge area in green in the south part of it, which almost no one lives at. And just have this huge section that you don't even see any roads, and you see a few roads, and well, there's a city right here, but almost no one lives here. Something like a very high percentage, maybe 70, 80, 90% of the people live along the coastline in northern Venezuela. It is northern Venezuela where you get all the population. Now, one thing that is kind of curious about this is you have the very tip top of the Andes Mountains that come up through here. Now, the Andes Mountains are very, very tall, so what's going to happen is at the tops of the Andes Mountains you have quite a few cooler areas. You may even have snow at the top of some of the Andes Mountains, and I'm not sure if that's the case here, but regardless, it would be much more elevated and it would be a lower temperature. So I don't know if you can see it right here, but there are these red dots all throughout these mountains right here. So what people have done is they have, instead of living in the lowlands where it's very, very hot, they've decided to form towns up in the higher areas. And you know, that's a pretty clever thing. Now, Venezuela used to have a lot of crops, and they never were considered a very successful crop exporter like Brazil has been. But Venezuela at one point discovered that they had something, well, they have oil. And you can see the oil sign right here. And they've had a problem with the oil, even though it's probably a huge export for them. It is a very huge export. Well, I found this PowerPoint online, and this is something that I got from it. You can see that Venezuela is one of the world's largest producers of oil and natural gas. Yes, the United States gets a lot of their oil from Venezuela. And look at this, about half of the country's money comes from oil sales. This is a big deal in Venezuela. Venezuela really gets a lot of profit from this oil, probably tons and tons of jobs that come from this oil. And you can see here you have oil rigs that are off the coast of Venezuela. Turns out here down at the bottom you have this oil refinery, goes on a long ways right through here. Now, the problem is that if you have a whole lot of oil, there is a little bit more chance of spilling that oil. And if you have oil spills, say out in the ocean, then that really can be an environmental concern, and that's exactly what Venezuela has run into. Oil spills and tanker leaks damage the Caribbean Sea, and that's the sea just north of Venezuela, and the lakes inland. And it has created environmental problems as well as making it harder for fishermen to make a living. And you have to believe that since this is one of the standards in our curriculum, that there really must be a big problem there for our standards here in a whole nother country to actually specify that there are oil problems with leakage and with spills and with pollution that have to do with Venezuela. Now, that's all I'm going to talk about Venezuela. One of the other things I'm going to have in this kind of wrap-up video is something in a whole other part of the Caribbean, and it's going to be in Haiti, and it's going to be about Toussaint Louverture. Now, Haiti, you can see right here, is part of this island. It's just to the east and southeast of Cuba. Now, Haiti, of course, had a was a victim of imperialism. I guess you could call it a victim, but they were part of imperialism. But it was not Spain that controlled Haiti. It was France that controlled Haiti. And Haiti had a lot of slaves. Many areas in the Americas had slaves that had been brought over to Haiti. And Louverture is kind of the one who helped not only free the slaves, but helped Haiti get out of the burden from France. Louverture was a slave. He was blessed enough to have a master who let he and his family learn to read and write, and he took advantage of that by reading absolutely as much as he could. And whenever there was a revolution in France, this was 1789, there was a revolution in France, Louverture and a lot of the educated slaves who knew about that were excited because some of the people who were starting to get in power in France, which is way over across the ocean, started having the enlightened idea of freeing the slaves. Now, the slaves, keep in mind, in the United States would not be freed for 70 years after this. So this was something that was kind of early for its time. There were still many, many enslaved people in the Americas at the time. So he ended up fighting for the French in battles around here. Britain and Spain had tried to creep in on Haiti, so Louverture would organize men and fight for France because he thought that they would be free. But then eventually, when one group came out of power in France and another group into power in France, sure enough, the slaves were made to be slaves again. And the leader of France, Napoleon, who's kind of famous in his own right here, Napoleon had felt the pressure to free these slaves because Louverture had already proven himself as to being quite a leader and being able to carry men into battle. And I think that Napoleon kind of feared slave revolts just because of the success that Louverture had had. So Napoleon here did decide to just negotiate a freedom of the slaves in Haiti because of Toussaint Louverture. Now let's think who else he compares to in our curriculum. We had Father Hidalgo from Mexico. Father Hidalgo, a preacher who gave a speech that kind of started the anti-Spain movement, which got Mexico out from Spanish rule. You have Simon Bolivar, who down here south of Haiti, who had been a student in Europe, but he ended up freeing these countries from Spain. So Louverture did kind of the same thing. He helped free slaves and eventually Haiti from, in this case, the French rule. Hey, I hope you learned a little bit about Venezuela and Toussaint Louverture. Don't forget to go back and answer the questions.